Peace. What's good? How y'all doing? I pray this message reaches you all in the best of health, spirit, and mind. Welcome to another edition of 60 Days of History with ZaZa Ali. Today is day 5. We will be covering Tasmania, Samoa, and Fiji, which is featured in the section of the book that discusses ancient Polynesia. Chapter 1 is titled Queen Liliuokalani and Hawaii's Last Monarchy. And so we go into the royal family of Liliuokalani, and then we get into their ancestors, which are the ancient Polynesians. So today we will be covering some of ancient Polynesia. We know that was in Australia for thousands of years before Europeans settled in the Americas. It is estimated that they had reached Australia around 60,000 BCE. There have been many speculations as to how they got there. Tasmania was inhabited by an indigenous population since at least 35,000 years ago. The Aboriginal population at the time of British settlement in 1803 has been estimated at approximately 5,000 or more, but Europeans murdered a large amount of these people, so we can assume that they minimized their actual numbers. And then, of course, we have to account for the large number of indigenous people who died by coming in contact with Europeans because of many different types of diseases. In 1772, a French expedition led by Marc Joseph Marion du Fresnay landed on the island. Captain James Cook also sighted the island in 1777, and numerous other European seafarers made landfall. The first settlement was by the British at Risdon Cove on the eastern bank of the Derwent estuary in 1803 by a small party sent from Sydney under Lieutenant John Bowen. An alternative settlement was established by Captain David Collins to the south in 1804 in Sullivan's Cove on the western side of the Derwent, where fresh water was more plentiful. The latter settlement became known as Hobart Town, later shortened to Hobart after the British colonial secretary of the time, Lord Hobart. The settlement at Risdon was later abandoned. The early settlers were mostly convicts and military guards. Imagine that. Sounds like the same thing that happened in America. The early settlers were mostly convicts and military guards with the task of developing agriculture and other industries. Numerous other convict settlements were made in Van Diemen's Land, including secondary prisons such as the particularly harsh penal colonies at Port Arthur in the southeast and Macquarie Harbor on the west coast. The Aboriginal resistance to this invasion was so strong that troops were deployed across much of Tasmania to drive the Aborigines into captivity on nearby islands. For much of the 20th century, the Tasmanian Aboriginal people were widely and falsely thought of as being being an extinct cultural and ethnic group that had been exterminated by white settlers. Recent figures, as recent as 2016, for the number of people of Tasmanian Aboriginal descent vary according to criteria used to determine this identity, ranging from 6,000 to over 23,000 alive at the time. And the image on the right is of William Lane or Laney, who was thought to have died in 1869. And then the images on the left are of an Australian Aboriginal brother and young sister. The Samoan Islands are a group of islands, excuse me, in the central South Pacific, forming part of Polynesia and the wider region of Oceania. Collectively, this group of islands comprises all of Samoa and most of American Samoa, which is apart from Swine's Island, which is a part of the Takalau Islands. The two Samoan jurisdictions are separated by 40 miles of ocean. The population of the Samoan Islands is approximately 250,000, sharing a common language, Samoan, a culture known as Fa'a, Samoa, and an indigenous form of governance called Fa'a Matai. Most Samoans are full-blooded and are one of the largest Polynesian populations around the world. And here we can see images on the left of the high chief Tupua Tamasisi Titimai. Pardon me if I'm not pronouncing these right. I will get it right. And his Tulafal talking chief. And these images are from the 1880s. The oldest evidence of human activity in the Samoan Islands dates to around 1050 BCE. This comes from a Lapita site at Malufanua Wharf on Upalu Island. It was the European explorers and missionaries that transformed these islands for better or for worse. Christianity was introduced to the natives, and many local customs soon disappeared. In the late 1800s, rivalry between the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom resulted in the Tripartite Convention of 1889 that formally partitioned or separated the Samoan archipelago, which is a large body of islands, into a Germany colony and a United States territory, also known as American Samoa. Polynesian cultures have been radically changed. Oh, I already read that, didn't I? Yeah, I just read that. Okay, let's go. Let's keep it pushing. At the end of World War I, and over 42 years, and for 42 years, New Zealand occupied and governed the islands. The pro-independence Mau movement across the islands eventually led to the political independence of the Western Islands from New Zealand in 1962. The Eastern Islands, American Samoa, remains a political territory of the United States. Then, in 1962, Samoa became the first Polynesian nation to reestablish its independence in the 20th century. The local population is mostly indigenous Samoans. The port city of Apia is the center of local government and trade, and the economy revolves around agriculture, lumber, and tourism. In 1930, the US Congress sent a committee to investigate the status of American Samoa, led by Americans who were part of the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Polynesian cultures have been radically changed by Western colonialism. European explorers navigated much of the area in the latter quarter of the 18th century, and the first missionaries arrived in the late 1700s and 1800s. Britain annexed New Zealand through the Treaty of Waitangi, which was in 1840, but interethnic tension arose between the indigenous Maori. Other colonial powers that laid claim to various parts of Polynesia included France, Germany, New Zealand, the United States, and Chile. Fiji is a country and archipelago in the South Ocean. It is surrounded by the Coral Sea and is located about 1,300 miles north of Auckland, New Zealand. This archipelago consists of some 300 islands and 540 islets scattered over about 1 million square miles. Of that, 300 islands and about 100 of the 300 islands, about 100 are inhabited. The capital, Suva, is on the southeast coast of the largest island, Viti Levu, also known as Great Fiji. With the arrival of Europeans and colonialism in the 1700s, many elements of Fijian culture were either repressed or changed to ensure European, namely British, control. This was especially the case concerning traditional Fijian spiritual beliefs. Early colonists and missionaries made up stories about the concept of cannibalism in Fiji to give a reason for colonial intervention. By labeling native Fijian customs as debased and primitive, they were able to promote a narrative that Fiji was a paradise wasted on savage cannibals. This narrative was their justification for violence and corrective actions by the colonists, which accompanied the enforced transfer of power to Europeans. Extravagant stories made during the 19th century, such as that regarding Ratu Udre, who is said to have eaten 887 people and to have made a pile of stones to record his achievement, allowed an ongoing racial discrimination of the uncivilized, quote unquote, Fijian. Cannibalism, as a first impression, was an effective racial tool used by Europeans, which has endured through the 1900s and into the modern day. Authors such as Derek Carr, for example, have continued 19th century claims of freshly killed corpses piled up for eating and ceremonial mass human sacrifice on the construction of new houses and boats. Fiji was given the nickname the Cannibal Isles, although there is no historical proof of the existence of cannibalism amongst these ancient people. Imagine that. Ancient People is a show textbook by ZaZa Ali. It's a full color 349 page expose historical expose focused on ancient civilizations around the world. Available in paperback and hardcover, this book emphasizes vocabulary, spelling, critical thinking, and more. There are more than 450 images included in this book. We feature Hawaii's last monarchy and Queen Liliuokalani, the Moors in Spain, the Kandakis or queens of ancient Ethiopia and Kush, the African presence in Asia, as well as Pharaoh Hatshepsut and the 18th dynasty. You can get more information about the book at zazaali.com or click the link in the description. Peace and love.